Good morning. I'm Cheryl Mitchell with Tree Eleven Inc. and also with the Early Care and Learning Partnership. And we've been working very closely recently with Building Bright Futures to understand what's going on in the world of early care in Vermont. So I'm thrilled to have as our guest today LouAnn Beninati, who's been in this field for probably longer than as long as me, maybe 40 years. We ascertained that we probably met each other sitting on the floor of Mary Johnson Children's Center long before it was renovated. So, welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
I'm delighted that you're here today. And although we're going to talk a lot about your work as the Director of Viability Strategies for Let's Grow Kids, we'll also maybe get into your life in early childhood,
Great.
which is long and deep, and it has had a huge impact on the field. So I'm just thinking maybe we should start with your current job, if you could tell us a little
Sure.
bit about that.
Sure. I work for Let's Grow Kids. Let's Grow Kids is an organization that has a mission to, by 2025, have affordable, high-quality childcare accessible for all Vermont families with young children.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Great.
And so I work, as you said, as the Director of Program Viability Strategies. Let's Grow Kids works toward our mission in a number of ways, through policy development and through public engagement, but we also do a lot of work with childcare providers, with early educators, with programs in the field around quality improvement, around support, and around really working with them to develop strong networks so they can advocate for themselves, to really position themselves to be a strong early childhood workforce. So I work primarily around business strategies. We know from working with national partners, and also just those of us who've done this for a long time, it's one thing to be high quality in your services, but if you don't have a sustainable business model,
Right.
The program goes away. It's either based on the goodwill of an individual woman who, doesn't take a good salary and puts all of her time in, or it's a system that it just doesn't promote a sustainable business, and that's what we need: high quality, but we need sustainable businesses. And so,
And you had some amazing successes last year in the legislature moving towards
there
that,
were some
right?
amazing policy decisions that were made through our legislature around funding for staff, improvements and supports, and working, for instance, with technical centers around bringing new people into the workforce through through professional development support. So we did have a number of successes. We need more. As you know, we'll be back.
2025 is not that far away
Exactly.
anymore.
We'll
Right?
be back, not me personally, but some folks in our organization will be back there this week working with families and actual people in the field to talk to legislators to keep going on that. We're on the right track, and we need to keep going. But when we get there in 2025, folks like me are working to ensure that we have a strong system of early care and learning in the state. So when people are, when our state system is ready, our early childhood system is ready. So business practices, one being shared services, which has been sort of the focus of my work recently.
So let's come back to shared services in a minute, but you have this deep, deep history and experience with early childhood programs. Could you share a little bit of that with us?
Sure. Well, I was one of those sort of early 70s young girl who ended up here in Vermont to go to college. Really,
Where were you from?
I'm from upstate New York. Grew up in
Whereabouts?
Saratoga,
Oh,
actually.
Saratoga.
So yeah, and had an associate's degree from one of the state universities in New York, and really was just sort of, where should I go? And loved Vermont. So I went to Johnson State College and never went home. So just really found.
And did you get a teaching license there? Were they still doing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had a teaching license and then went on to get a master's in, they had a master's in early childhood also. So an associate's degree in what was called nursery education. It's now early childhood education. That's how old I am.
Well, that's how leading edge you are, because now we're trying to bring together
We're going back. Yes,
nursing
exactly. I keep
education and
thinking
early
maybe that
childhood.
was
So,
the better
yeah.
term. So yes, an associate BA in elementary ed with a license. The licensure used to be pre-K through 8th grade. I was licensed from 3 to 8th grade, I believe, my initial license.
Wow.
Yeah, and then a master's degree. So then went on to teaching in early childhood programs, but then worked with some families to open a couple of programs. One at an agency in Burlington which is called LouAnn now, but was called the Elizabeth Lund Home. And then that closed, and so I worked with a group of women to start the Robin's Nest Children's Center, which is an amazing little program, still thriving 34 years later in the Old North End in Burlington.
Yeah.
So,
and the robin of whom Robin's Nest is named is now at Champlain College?
Exactly. So that name was because Robin Plouffe was an intern at Lund when we had our little program there. She had developed this little large motor area that they called the Robin's Nest, which our families who were there loved, so we sort of took it. So then for the next 30 years, poor Robin, in her own program called Stepping Stones and Robin's Nest, were confused for the next.
Oh, interesting.
So,
Wow.
but and yes, Robin is at Champlain College, another phenomenal early educator in our state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you move from that to doing the work that you're doing now?
Well, I had been at Robin's Nest for a long time, and I still am so invested in that program. And I think, for me anyway, and I think for most people, you get to a point where you see new leadership would really help a program continue to thrive in a way that at the time in my life, it probably was time to move on. So I took a year. I became the preschool teacher, and the actual preschool teacher at the time was hired as the executive director. So we flipped roles for a year for a nice transition, because I'd been the only director. And found a job coordinating the STARS system with Joanna, who's still there now.
So that was when you began your life here in Addison County?
Yes, exactly. So I came down and worked with Joanna for a little less than 5 years, I think, working with her, coordinating the system. So, yeah.
So I just know that we were all so thrilled when you came into that, because you really knew what quality childcare was like, and the STAR system. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how it's designed to help really improve quality?
Well, I was one of those directors early on that was really nervous about it. I remember, the road shows that they brought around to describe it, and as you learned more about it, the goal of it being sort of a step-by-step, step ahead recognition system from basic regulatory compliance level to accreditation or the highest level really made sense to me. And so they had designed the system sort of in a very Vermont way, and now we have just gone through a process of evaluation that's really helping us to look at it and tweak it in a way that makes it really be able to help programs see their progress through the steps. And so I'm excited. The phase 1 went into effect September 1 just now of this year, and then phase 2, which will be some larger changes that I think will be amazing. I'm lucky enough to still be a part of the work that's helping to design
So
that.
are you part of the advisory council?
Of it's called the Evolution Committee that they work to evolve it, and yes, so I've been able to work
Not
on
exactly 10,000 years.
Exactly, but we're moving faster than, so I think it's going to be great. And they've done, Child Development Division has worked closely with stakeholders to go out to the field and say, how does this look? And the stakeholders have said, no, this is not good. And so we've gone back and tweaked it. So I think programs will be pleased when we finally get there. It's a difficult process we're in.
And now everybody, all new registered and licensed
as of
programs
September
need to be
1,
in it, right?
as soon as you are regulated, you are
Right.
at 1 star, which was, I believe, the intent all along. It was sort of meant to be a transition in as a voluntary system, and so we're now, I want to say we're about at 15 years old with stars, something like that. So, yeah.
So then you moved from STARS to Let's Grow Kids, which was called the Permanent Fund at that time, right?
Exactly.
And people were thrilled that they had grabbed you up. Do you want to talk about what your roles have been there?
Yeah, well, the exciting thing for me was that Let's Grow Kids is working a privately a private organization, but works very closely with state systems and other private systems, and really working to bring folks together that have this goal of quality care and early education for all children, and how, as a small state, 600,000 people, we can do this here in Vermont. It's difficult, and for other states it's more complicated. We really can do this, and the leadership are so inspiring, and really I was so excited to have the opportunity to come and work on the ground. In this case, the roles that I play primarily are with the people in the field, to say, what can we do about the way that you're working to make this a better system?
Can you just tell us a little bit about why does quality care matter compared to just a safe place?
Well, I think it's been pretty well proven the amazing things that are happening in those little brains in the early years. And so just sort of basic needs, certainly all young children need, but those sparks that really need to be sparked, that need, that interaction, the opportunity to learn through playing, interacting with other people, looking into each skilled caregivers and trained caregivers' eyes, and having those connections just really have been proven to be what helps children develop. And there's so little time in those first 3 and then 5 years.
So
it's
fast,
so
doesn't it?
And some families can do that on their own. Some families have the will and the opportunity to stay home with their children, and that's lovely, and they have the skills to do all these things we're talking about. And we would love a world where that can happen if that's what the family wants. But most of our families have all parents working.
So it's now, I think Vermont is one of the highest in the nation, right?
Yep.
It's more, I used to say 70%, but I think it's higher than that
I always
now.
say the 70% too,
Yeah.
but it is something like that. And I also know, for me, that my personal experience is I was raised in this multi-generational Sicilian American family where all these women raised us. That was not just my mother, it was my aunts and my uncles and the neighbors, and that extended family is not necessarily available to people nowadays because of the way people live and work. And so a quality early care setting really offers that as well. You have that extended family, you raise your children together, you have support for each other. So it's for the children, absolutely. It's for the parents as well, and for families. So it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I was so grateful because when my son was born, I was working at Mary Johnson Children's Center, and there were all these amazing people around, men and women, who were devoted to supporting child development, and I knew nothing. And my mom was far away. She didn't move up until my daughter was born. So that relationship with a child care program, if you don't have your own family around, is so huge.
It really is. And imagine the difference if it's that well-run, skilled child care program, or if it's, as you asked the initial question, just your kids are safe. Well, you're not going to get that support, those relationships, in the same way. So
you're really helping child care programs. Is it both centers and homes, or primarily centers with understanding business models?
It's both centers and homes. Here in Addison County, I'm so excited because once again Addison County is doing amazing things with this work around what we call shared services. Shared services being a concept that other sectors and businesses have used for years, which is you keep your individual business, I keep mine, but we share some service that's not necessarily the service connected to what our business is or the skill that we have. Farmers have done it for years and done more than sharing services. Farmers have had co-ops, obviously, for years. But carpet stores, for instance, across the nation share
Carpet
services.
stores? Tell me about
That's
this.
one. Yeah, that's one I've learned about. So it's the idea behind it is economies of scale and economies of expertise. Here in Vermont, our child care programs are small compared to the national numbers. About 40 families in each child care program. Some are obviously larger, some are smaller. But we love that because that's the individual philosophy, culture, relationships that we were talking about. But the problem with that is each one of those small child care programs has to have a full administrative system to manage their programs. Regulatory compliance with the state, billing and budgeting kind of things, managing staff, professional development, all of the things, wait list management, they have to do for each individual program. And who does that work primarily? The woman in the
teaching director.
who is the most skilled, highest skilled, most experienced person often. And where is she in the office doing billing instead of
being with the kids
and mentoring the other staff, pedagogical leadership, all of that. So we can, and she's doing accounting that she's taught herself, and she's doing it okay, but probably a little bit slower than a skilled financial person would do. So if we can get programs to come together, offload some of this admin stuff to a central organization and allow them to focus on what they do well. So economies of scale and expertise. And here in Middlebury, we're doing that, and I am beyond excited.
Well, I've been to some of the meetings, and the idea that you could, a lot of people moving into this modern world like me know next to nothing about IT services, and to have a go-to place to deal with that, or to have, I remember the most thrilling thing about no longer being a child care director, and there were many downsides, but was when the toilets were plugged, I didn't need to deal with it. And so the idea that they're able to share maintenance and
so what has to happen, and it happened here, and in this case here in Middlebury right now it is just licensed programs, but in some other places we have included family child care, and some of their work that we're doing includes family child care. But right now we have a number of programs that have worked together to identify a hub for their network. It's Counseling Service of Addison County, well-respected organization with a strong systems in place. As you mentioned, they are sharing IT, sharing maintenance, offering HR services, which is a huge need for child care programs, and you can imagine these small programs don't have a good foundation for that. Sharing, organizing, coordination of professional development for the region. So just offering discounted oil for the programs, not only for the programs but for their employees. So it's can be a discount for the
so
business
it's spreading
itself.
A little bit further than
But it's also a benefit for your employees. So just a lot of ways that the hub has systems in place that they can expand to include these programs. So, and we've got many of the long-standing programs in Addison County participating.
Well, I know we've been excited to think about the possibilities now of doing, of learning together, creating, learning communities or communities of practice, maybe putting in a master's degree program for early on staff members, and a lot of it's made possible because of the shared services.
And we're just starting. This is a very new, it's grant funded through Let's Grow Kids and the support of CSAC, and then the programs will also be, sharing some of the costs of it as we go forward. But the idea being the costs will be lower for the programs than if they were paying for whatever it is individually for their own program. And it will be better quality and will serve the whole region.
And one of the new changes, I think it started September 1st, is that as all programs enter the STARS system, then they'll all have access to your shared services website, which is great. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for for not letting me forget that. So we work with a national company called CCA Global. They do shared services for the country. They have about 37 states working with them now. And we sponsor this website, this platform that has resources on every facet of the work of early care and learning.
It's an amazing website, and for those of you that are watching, it will come up later, so don't worry that you're not seeing it just now.
So so as long as you are in STARS, which now all regulated programs are, you have access to it. We also put local Vermont content on it. So there's information right now, for instance, about the Vermont AUIC conference coming up in October, so that folks, we have access to our to CDD's website, so that it's a simple, the idea being, again, efficiencies,
Right.
one-stop shopping for all kinds of things. If you have to develop a policy, we have a template, so you find it and then you tweak it to fit you. It's all high quality, well vetted information, so that's exciting. We have about almost 1,300 people using it right now.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've had this amazing journey in early childhood. Where are you headed next? Once everybody's regulated, once everybody's 5 stars,
Yep.
once everybody's doing shared services, what are your dreams for the next
I'm headed
5
into
years?
retirement. No.
Not yet, LouAnn.
No, I mean, this, for me personally, this is my life work, and I know this as a mother, as a grandmother, and as
So
a
we
community
didn't
member.
even ask about that. Tell us a little bit about being a mom and a grandma.
I have 4 children. I have 4 grandchildren. 2 of my children are here in Vermont raising their families, and one's in California, one's in New York City. So yeah, and we raised, I raised my family here in Vermont. My husband and I met at Johnson State College. So yeah, yeah, it's been a great journey, and it really I can't imagine raising my children without the community that I had at the
Yeah.
Robin's Nest Children's Center and other places I've been. And yeah, I think this is work, and it's hard work, but it is a calling in a lot of ways, and I can't imagine not continuing to work on it. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have made such a difference
Oh.
in this community over these many years. And we're almost out of time. I'm just worried that I might have forgotten to ask you about something you'd like to talk about, or if you have any closing thoughts for the audience.
I think the only thing, I don't think we've forgotten anything. I think it's groundbreaking what's happening here in Middlebury with Mary Johnson and College Street and Otter Creek and Starksboro Preschool and Quarry Hill and Bristol Family Center working together to really ensure that you folks have quality childcare in these sustainable businesses here in this region, as well as these jobs that will really sustain the people in this field. And that, to me, is the coming together. And it takes compromise. It takes leaders being willing to make changes in the way they do their work, and a strong organization like Counseling Service of Addison County stepping up. And so I'm excited to see what comes next.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. I love that they're talking about resilience, and it really helps the early childhood
Yep.
community. And I'm really grateful to you for taking the time to be
thank
here
you.
with us today. And grateful to all of you who are listening today. If you have questions, LouAnn's contact information is going to come up in just a moment. And if you're a nonprofit, or if you have things going on in your lives or organizations that you think our community should know about, I'd really encourage you to get in touch with the folks here at the community television station. They're just amazing, and you don't really need to know how to do anything. That's where I was, and they will hold your hand every step of the way. So thanks for listening to us, and please do get in touch with LouAnn or check out the websites.